This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Today's podcast is also brought to you by The Athletic, premium coverage for passionate Detroit sports fans. Listeners can get 20% off the first year of an annual subscription by visiting theathletic.com/DSP.
The ride comes to an end, but what a great ride it was. Next on Michigan Podcast.
But there's going to be one team that's going to play solely as a team. No man is more important than the team. No coach is more important than the team. The team, the team, the team.
Looks deep for Anthony Clark. Waits for it. Yes, caught. This is no time for that. In the pocket and a sack. Tim Jamison. Brady gets terrific. Throws it and a touchdown. Knight again. Schultz just before Brazil got him. And the leaping interception by Woodson. Arbor back to throw over the middle. Caught by Collier at the 5 on his feet. Touchdown, Michigan. On its way. It's good. He's 5'7", 179 pounds. A junior at Michigan. But Jamie Morris packs a wallop, and he delivers for Bo Schembechler. And here's your first play. Pressure coming. Second. It is Glenn Steele, number 81, who fought his way through the traffic. Option. And Robinson calls his own number, and he's going to score. Oh, an easy touchdown for Robinson and Michigan.
Win it. We're going to win the championship again because we're going to play as a team. And when we play as a team, and the old season is over, you and I know it's going to be Michigan again.
Go Blue, welcome to this week's edition of Michigan Podcast. I'm Steve Deace, and of course, we're going to have plenty about the ride coming to an end for our beloved Wolverines, coming up just short of winning our first national championship in college basketball since 1989, Villanova defeating Michigan 79-62. We're going to have plenty about that game, as well as Michigan's comeback victory over Loyola this season, what it meant. Looking ahead to next season, who might be staying, who might be going, what new players are coming in. We'll get to all of that in a few minutes, and we'll have a hockey preview of the Frozen Four with our good friend Michael Spath from WTKA in Ann Arbor in just a few moments. But I just wanted to begin on a personal note, and I just wanted to say to the entire men's basketball program, thank you. This has been one hell of a ride. It was a ton of fun. And I go back to where we were as fans following that bowl game in January, how despondent we were, how disappointed we were. And then we were thinking, well, maybe we'll be a bubble team or an 8-9 seed in the NCAA tournament. Hockey's schedule, the second half is too difficult. It's going to be a rebuilding year with a new coach there, Mel Pearson. And then men's basketball went to East Lansing against number 2 Michigan State and won in impressive fashion. And that really touched off an incredible season. A school record for wins, the magical weekend at Madison Square Garden ending with another Big Ten tournament championship, this run in the NCAA tournament, Jordan Poole's miraculous shot against Houston, the run all the way to the final game, and the entire time, both the coaches and the players in this team were just exceedingly likable. It was a lot of fun. From 7th in the Big Ten, that's where we were predicted at the start of the season. 7th in the Big Ten. Villanova was picked 7th in the country. We were picked 7th in the Big Ten in November. And out of 351 teams in Division I college basketball, we were one of the final 2 playing on Championship Monday. What it did for the psyche of our fan base after really a beyond disappointing football season. What it did to get our maize and blue daubers back up, to reestablish just our own confidence in our own team, to change our temperament. Could you imagine how much longer, darker, brutal this winter would have been without this basketball team? Every single one of you made this something for me as a fan, and I know I speak for everybody watching. We will never forget. We enjoyed it immensely. We know you gave everything you had, and that's all we as fans can ask of any team. And yes, we're disappointed in the loss on Monday. Not nearly as disappointed, I'm sure, as you players and coaches are, but deeply appreciative of the ride and the fun you gave us. You made what could have been a brutal winter thrilling. And most of all, you made it fun. Go Blue, thank you. If you're wondering, hey, how can I support what you guys are doing at Michigan Podcast? This is one way. You can support us on Patreon. And as you can see, every now and then we are giving exclusive content to our Patreon supporters, including my thoughts on the championship game, which I actually thought Michigan was going to win, as well as the semifinal victory over Loyola. Several of you watching us this week on Michigan Podcast are already assisting us and supporting us on Patreon. Thank you so much. And yes, even during the off season, we'll be updating with content for our Patreon supporters. So please consider supporting us at patreon.com/Michigan Podcast. Back here on Michigan Podcast, joined now by our good friend Michael Spath from WTKA in Ann Arbor. And Michael, not the end we would have hoped for, but still one hell of a ride this season was. And at the start of our podcast this week, I was taking our audience back to January, the dark early days of winter, and Michigan in that abysmal performance in that bowl game. And we were looking at maybe if we're lucky, we'll be a bubble team in men's basketball. The schedule for hockey, which we'll talk about them too, is way too tough in the second half of the year. It looked like it was going to be the winter of our discontent. And now here we're sitting in early April and we're like, oh yeah, spring football is going on. What a great ride. And it really began with that win in East Lansing. Just a tremendous overall season for John Belein and this exceedingly likable team, Michael.
Yeah, I've come around on this a little bit. Admittedly, when the game ended on Monday night and then early Tuesday morning, I was not in a good place as a fan. I was very disappointed in the outcome, very disappointed in Michigan. Did not play its best basketball, did not play up to its potential, and kind of had a little sour taste in my mouth. But when you look back on it and you think about the run, because at the end of the day, Steve, this is something that my brother and I were talking about. This, he reminded me of this. He said, you know what? To go back to all those years for Tiger baseball, and as disappointing as it was that the Tigers never won a World Series, it's like, how much fun did we have going to the ball games? How much fun did we have watching the playoffs? How much fun did we have beating the Yankees and beating the A's and beating all these teams? And he's spot on. And that's what this Michigan basketball season was for us in January and in February and certainly in March. Every weekend we had something to look forward to. Every weekend we could, thump our chests and we could talk about the pride and talk about the character of these guys and talk about how great of a person John Belein is. And so, fandom is a funny thing, and it can certainly, there's a lot of good moments. There's a lot of low moments. We're probably too wrapped up in our team sometimes, and how they perform maybe has too much of a hangover effect, good or bad, on us as fans. But overall, you're right, when you think back to where we were after that Outback Bowl, where this basketball team was, where this hockey team was, it's been an incredible ride, and it's certainly we've enjoyed it. We've enjoyed it, and that's what life is all about: is enjoying yourself day to day, game to game. And we certainly have been able to do that the last couple of months.
I used to be good friends with someone who did one of the best rebuilding jobs in women's basketball in recent women's basketball history. When I asked him once his coaching philosophy, he looked at me deadpan and said, well, it's a real easy game when the ball goes in the basket. And I think we learned that last night. We did not play as dominant defensively as we had, but we're also playing a next-level offense, and we held them under 80 points. That's probably pretty close to the best you could hope for. I think they averaged about 77 points in the 4 games that they lost. We made them beat us with really, at best, their 3rd scoring option, and on many nights, he's their 4th scoring option in Dante DiVincenzo. And in the end, I think it's real simple. If you're 3 for 23, against an elite team in today's college basketball, 99% of the time, if you're 3 from 23 from 3, you're not winning that game. I mean, Michael, even if we were 8 out of 23, which is still not very good, that's 15 more points in a game you lost by 17. I think it's that simple. Yes, they're the better team. Yes, they're the better program. That's why they're third and fourth scoring option. We couldn't stop him. But in the end, we weren't going to beat any of these other number 1 and number 2 seeds in this tournament shooting 3 of 23 from 3, period.
No, I mean, you're spot on, and it really is that simple. When I look at this game and I've tried to figure out, I mean, there's a lot of like little moments in there, and Xavier Simpson, his ball is goaltended. They don't call it. It turns out to be a 4-point game, and then it could have been a 4-point game, and then it swings to a 9-point game when Jalen Brunson comes out and hits a 3. There's a lot of little moments. Duncan Robinson picking up his second foul, but it's really as straightforward as that. Is if you make a couple more of your 3-pointers, this is a ball game. This is a close ball game going into the final 5 minutes of that second half, and instead, inexplicably, Michigan was one of the poorest 3-point shooting teams during this NCAA tournament. I can't quite put my finger on that. I don't know how that happened. Somehow this team went from playing with a lot of swagger and confidence and in rhythm behind the 3-point line for most of the season, and especially in the Big Ten tournament, to going, a 180, going from a 10 to a 0 in terms of confidence in themselves during the NCAA tournament. Outside of the Texas A&M game, they shot the ball incredibly poor from behind the arc in the entire NCAA tournament. And, they don't have the great shooters that they've had in the past. I mean, Duncan Robinson is certainly in that mix. They don't have Nick Stauskas and Trey Burke and Tim Hardaway Jr., but they have some very good 3-point shooters. And guys like Muhammad Ali Abdul-Rahman were just subpar in the NCAA tournament. And Moritz Wagner was subpar in the NCAA tournament. And Jordan Poole couldn't find his stroke. It really maybe, outside of the 3-point shot he hit against Houston, he really didn't have it in the entire postseason at all. So lots of guys that were better 3-point shooters than this that just went into a complete team funk at the same time. And ultimately, they got by 5 teams in the NCAA tournament by being, well, I should say 4, because the A&M game's a little bit of an outlier. 4 teams in the NCAA tournament by being bad from behind the 3. And at some point you thought it was going to cost them, and it did. It did against a team that was the best team in the country and a team that could hit their 3-pointers.
When you look back on this season, what's going to stand out the most to you?
I think vanquishing our rivals. I think the way the Big Ten tournament came together in New York City, Michigan having an opportunity to play Michigan State for a second time and beating the Spartans when that was supposedly, one of Izzo's best teams ever. I think getting revenge on Purdue when, the Boilermakers had beaten Michigan twice during the regular season and very close games. It came down to the wire. Getting revenge on Purdue and winning the Big Ten tournament. I mean, let's face it, as much fun as we had in the NCAA tournament, all those games were kind of agonizing because Michigan was not playing their best basketball.
Right.
For that weekend stretch in New York City, the first weekend of March, that is when Michigan played its absolute best basketball of the season. And I had the most fun watching that particular brand of Michigan, watching Duncan Robinson, watching Mo Wagner, watching Marr. Xavier Simpson came alive. So I'm going to remember New York City and, those last 2 games, the crowd noise inside New York City, how Michigan fans kind of overtook Madison Square Garden. That, to me, is the epitome of this season. And really just watching the evolution of John Belein, too. I mean, we can talk about the X's and O's and the defense that he brings, but if you're a basketball fan and you want your guy to essentially be John Belein, you want your guy to go out there and have fun. You want your guy to show up to press conferences and be open and honest with the media. You want him to be selfless. You want him to be gregarious. You want him to have some humor. John Belein is literally what you want every coach in America to be. And so as an alum, as a fan, I could not be more proud that this is my guy. This is our guy.
Let's take a look ahead to next season. And much has been made about Michigan's incoming basketball recruiting class. And for some of you in our audience, maybe this is the first time you've heard some of these names, because this team, you have a tendency not to focus on the next class when your current team is doing really well. You tend to focus more on the next class when your current team is struggling. But if you look at Michigan's recruiting class, you see Ignas Brazdeikis there from Ontario. He is a 5-star prospect, according to Rivals.com. 3 other prospects there are considered 4-star prospects. Colin Castleton, Brandon Johns, who was runner-up for Mr. Basketball in Michigan, David DeJulius, who was 3rd, and then Adrian Nunez out of Oakville, Connecticut, who has that 6'5", slender frame that guys like Karis LeVert and Jordan Poole came to Michigan with. This is considered Belein's second-best class to the class that came in from 2013, and it's being added to a roster that's going to return at least 6 of its top 9 players. I think Matthews will declare without an agent. He should go through the process, but I think it's pretty likely he'll be back. So you assume, obviously, Duncan Robinson and Muhammad Ali Abdul-Rahman are seniors. If you think Mo Wagner is gone, you look at those recruits with 6 of the top 9 players from this year coming back, and maybe you have a guy like that 10th player, Austin Davis, is ready to take a big leap, going through Camp Sanderson through a year, as we've seen Mo Wagner and John Teskey do in the past. What do you think about this roster as it stands right now heading into next year, Michael?
I'm really excited about it, but there's going to be a lot of question marks in the offseason. How much does Xavier Simpson get challenged by David DeJulius or Eli Brooks if he comes back for his sophomore season? Xavier Simpson was kind of like that spark plug, that X factor for Michigan as they got really good, but he's limited offensively. And can you find a more reasonable split between an offensive guy and a defensive guy? Is there a guy out there that can be both? So I think that's an interesting question mark. I think when you talk about Moritz Wagner going pro, you're going to lose a lot of his energy, his enthusiasm, his intangibles, his willingness to dive in for every loose ball. I think a natural heir apparent, because of everything we've heard, is Jordan Poole, because Jordan Poole is a guy dancing on the sideline. He brings energy. He brings confidence. But, Steve, you and I both know, we watched that game yesterday when Michigan, I think, made it a 12-point game, or maybe made it a 14-point game. Jordan Poole gets the ball, comes running down with his hair on fire, Tasmanian Devil, and throws the ball away. In a key moment in the game, also they come down, hit a 3-pointer, and boom, it's lights out again.
You know who that reminded me of? That reminded me of Mo Wagner.
Who was that?
It reminded me of Mo Wagner his freshman year, coming off the bench against Notre Dame in that NCAA tournament game, trying to grant us a spark, who was kind of doing much of the same thing. That's a guy that, recognizes that role needs to be filled. He's just physically not ready to fill it yet.
Yeah, and so he's got to learn how to play within, this construct of the Michigan team, play a little bit smarter. He's got to be able to deliver more consistently from the offense. I mean, he certainly was a microwave off the bench, but that microwave would last a couple of minutes and then kind of petered out. Mm-hmm. So you got to get more from Jordan Poole. Isaiah Livers is an interesting kid. I mean, we saw the offense. We saw what he could do in the middle part of the season, and it disappeared. There's a lot of question marks on this. Who's going to be the outside shooters? Can John Teskey expand his role even more, or is John Teskey that we saw, the 10 to 12 minutes kind of guy, is that what he is going forward? Can he shoot the 3 from the outside and stretch the defense a little bit? I think there's going to be a lot of excitement because unlike a lot of years where you have those off-season questions, you're probably thinking like, ooh, I don't know if that's ever going to be answered. I think all those questions get answered. I just don't know who the guys are that do that. But I have complete faith in John Belein to figure that out. That is probably, as I go forward as a Michigan basketball fan, John Belein has proven himself without a shadow of a doubt, and he should have proven it to most of us 5 years ago, and unfortunately some of us are real slow and dim-witted and take too long to figure this out. But you can trust that John Belein will take all those pieces and he'll make something really special out of it next season.
You're there in Ann Arbor. Mo Wagner, gone for good. What's your read there on the ground?
You know what? I'm back and forth on this one. His stock is, we talked about this on our show on Tuesday, his stock is what it is at this point. Mm-hmm. I don't think he comes back for a senior year and all of a sudden he shows the scouts something that he hasn't already shown them. If they're going to draft him, if he's going to be a first rounder, he's going to be a first rounder late in the game right now, or he's going to be late in the game next year. Does he hurt himself by coming back? Only if you look at it from the money financial standpoint, that he could lose a little bit of money because it's 1 year that he's playing in college versus playing in the NBA or playing overseas. But because of the fact that he has the overseas opportunity to go play in Germany, make 7 figures, be a superstar there. I don't know what the rush is. I really don't. I mean, he made it this far. He knows what's coming back next year. He could, compete for a national championship again next year with all the pieces that he's got coming back. I think it's a lot closer to 50-50 than I've seen this morning. I've seen a lot of predictions that he's going. Let's just assume he's going. I honestly think that this kid's going to think about it for a little while, test the waters again, see what they're telling him, and then we'll have to see what happens after that. But either way, you wish the kid the very best. I'd love to see him come back for one more run, but he's been a great Michigan man, and if he decides to go pro, he will have a certain fan out of me and certainly a fan out of you and all Michigan fans out there.
Well, if he comes back, we're over a scholarship, so John Belein will have to figure that out. If he comes back, I think we're going to be a preseason top 5 team. Assuming he doesn't come back, all of the early looks, which don't include every NBA early entrant and everything else that we're going to figure out the next couple of months, but all of the early looks I've seen so far have us anywhere from 9th to 16th. Think that's about right?
If he doesn't come back, then I think probably right around the 6 to 8 range is where I would have Michigan. Probably 8th I'd have Michigan, because you're bringing back Xavier Simpson and you're bringing back Jordan Poole and John Teskey and Charles Matthews, I would assume. I think this is a team that going into next season, without Moritz Wagner, is still a preseason Big Ten favorite, is still a preseason top 10 team. I'm, as this year proved, less concerned with what their preseason ranking is or even where they are in January, but I'm more concerned with where they are in February and March. But I'm excited for the future of Michigan basketball. Steven, you know this because you and I talked quite a bit. My only fear is that 5 years down the road, we're looking back at this like the 2006 Michigan-Ohio State game, maybe the 2016 Michigan-Iowa game for football, certainly Detroit Tigers making it to a couple of World Series and not winning it all. When you have that opportunity in front of you, as we've seen in college basketball, we've seen it is so difficult to make it all the way to the championship and then to win it. I just, the windows can close, they can change, things happen. I really wanted a championship because they can never take it away from you. Instead, we're going to sit there and look back and go, what could have happened? What would have happened? What if they don't win one in the next 5 years?
Final question, Michael. Hockey in the Frozen Four this week up in St. Paul, one of the 3 Big Ten teams to make it to the Frozen Four. Obviously, this was a team that was expected to be rebuilding in Mel Pearson's first year. Instead, along with men's basketball, I think combined, they've lost, 2 games since like February 6th. What chances, what odds do you give Michigan hockey at the Frozen Four to finish the ride Michigan's men's basketball team couldn't quite finish?
Well, Red Berenson went to 11 Frozen Fours. He played in the championship game 3 times. So, I mean, it's one of those things where it shows how difficult it is to get there. You know what? I like their chances just because they're playing their best hockey right now. They've had this long layoff, but so has Notre Dame, so has Ohio State, so has Minnesota Duluth, where they've had to wait 10 days between games. I think their chances are as good as anybody else at this Frozen Four to win it. They've got a hot goalie. They've got a number 1 line that is producing at an elite level. They have a defensive core that everybody's playing their role. They're limiting the opportunities. They're limiting the shots on net. The biggest thing's going to come down to, and Mel Pearson was on our show on Tuesday talking about it, how many power play opportunities they give up. Michigan is not a good penalty-killing team this year. They rank in the bottom, I think, 10. Last time I checked, the bottom 10 in terms of penalty kill efficiency nationally. They were able to survive that in the Northeast Regional against Northeastern and against Boston University because each of those teams only got 2 power plays per game. If they hold Notre Dame to 2 power plays in the game on Thursday night, I think Michigan hockey wins this. If Notre Dame gets 4 or 5 power plays, then Michigan's going to have a very hard time trying to beat the Irish on Thursday night.
Michael Spath from WTKA. Always going to talk to you, my friend. Go Blue.
All right. Well, look forward to seeing the podcast when it goes up and looking forward to talking to you on Friday later this week.
Quick final note here on what's coming up with Michigan podcast. I guess to use the TV jargon, our season finale will be in 2 weeks. We will wrap up Michigan spring football following the Michigan spring game on April the 14th. So we will not have an episode next week. I'm actually out of town for business. We'll come back with our season finale, finishing up on spring football. We'll go with a deep dive there. That doesn't mean we're going to be dark until later in the summer when prep for football season gets into full swing. We won't have a lot of full episodes, but we're going to have what we call Michigan Podcast Extras. So, for example, we get word on Shea Patterson's eligibility. Mo Wagner decides to return. There's, one of my little research projects, with stats and trends, that I love. I put one of those together. We're going to have those periodically through the off season. We'll be doing some previews of the opposing teams we have with football coming up this fall as well. So there will still be plenty here on our channel on YouTube for you to subscribe to. Please, if you haven't done so, please hit that subscribe button, hit that like button on this video, as well as iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play. If you just listen to the audio version as well, we will still have plenty of content. It'll just be in a more condensed form until we get closer to football season, when we'll be back at full strength here on Michigan Podcast once again. Want to thank everybody that helps make this possible each and every week. One more time, thank you to John Belein and the entire men's basketball program. Until the next time here on Michigan Podcast, go Blue.